talk about this afternoon is the GRAD Partnership, and as I say talk, that's going to be a little bit of it. Mostly we're going to work together. It's going to be like a giant focus group. Because this is a group of very experienced folks with sort of early warning on track systems. So we're going to definitely make use of the wisdom of the crowd today. And really what I wanted to do is just give a little bit of background on the GRAD Partnership and really just show everyone who's been involved with Pathways to Adult Success. This is essentially like the operationalization of all the work many of us did on the EWS 2.0 recommendations. And just remember, I mean, who here are there folks who could actually work with us on the EWS 2.0 recommendations? Yeah, right, absolutely. So this is really, as you can see, like how do we operationalize what we put sort of the paper there. So I'll take us through that, and then we're going to spend a bulk of the time on some of the problems of practice we're facing in that operationalization. So really the connection is, it's past EWS 2.0, through the pandemic, gets us to the GRAD Partnership. That's sort of the journey. And just to remind folks, this is the presentation we gave in last time we were together in 2019 in October, sharing out the recommendations of the EWS 2.0 work group. And that was composed of, as you know, experienced users of early warning on tracks from schools, districts, state departments of education, nonprofits. We worked to propose some standards and common definitions what we call early warning on track 2.0. And I just want to share a few of our things so that you're going to see how relevant they are to sort of this next stage. So one of the things we were really trying to figure out is how do we extend early warning, which initially was about dropout prevention, to post-secondary success. And the conclusion we came to is we really wanted to keep this idea of a limited number of powerful indicators, not suddenly quadruple our indicators because we're expanding the post-secondary. And we really made the case that we looked at it, there's ways to take some of the ABCs and we found we could measure post-secondary success through variations of those indicators, right, as opposed to new indicators, right? And some of the work that subsequently happened after this actually demonstrated that, at least for four-year colleges, that really the best predictor to be, if you want to put it in a bumper sticker, which was decent grades in challenging classes, right? Getting more A's than C's, more B's than D's, but in challenging classes. Kids that did that had very high rates of success in four-year universities, and very few kids who went to four-year universities didn't have that sort of profile in high school. Some later research sort of verified sort of our intuition there, I guess what I'm saying. We also made the case, I think it's interesting, and it was good to look back at this to remind us for some of the current work, is that we said we probably needed two other types of indicators too, besides sort of those predictive indicators. We said one was about sort of a checklist of key preparation and application milestones. And in many ways, this became a lot of the navigation and guidance work in the Pathways to Adult Success, which is going to be our final session. And then we also said a checklist or composite measure that captures the intensity of preparation. Things like taking the required courses for state university system, or participation in APIB dual enrollment. And that's, again, that was a pretty good intuition because future data really bore that out, that it was really a combination of course performance and the intensity of those courses. And that was, of course, supported by you had to be there enough to get decent. It's hard to get decent grades if you're not in school a lot, right? So there's still those connections. So that was our sort of indicators recommendation. And then for the analysis, we pointed out it was very important to do this question of why are students on or off track, and to really consider root causes. And we made this distinction between, is it a specific circumstance about that individual or group of students, or is it more about systematic issues at the grade, school, district, and state level? And I think we heard a lot of that in our keynote address and some of our discussions this morning about really, you almost have to have it in a way, it's like early warning for kids, early warning for systems. And you need to sort of toggle between those to sort of have the best evidence of what's going on and insight to where's the most strategic point of action. We also said we need to draw on a wide range of quantitative and qualitative data to identify root cause, including the insights of the adults who know the students the best. But we cautioned that those root causes need to be actionable. Like, if we took it too far afield, like, those were very important things, but they were probably outside the zone of control of the people of the school, right? And not that they shouldn't campaign for those, but they probably also had to find ways, to this idea here, that often we need to provide supports at the individual or small group level to mediate the impacts of structural challenges while we're working to change them, right? Because some of those structural changes take time. And in the meantime, there's lots of kids being impacted by them, where we sort of have to just try to mediate those impacts. So I think, again, it's funny, there was a lot of foresight, I think we had, and it's been, and some of these actually through the pandemic really bear true, right? This idea of both looking for the bigger change, but recognizing in the intermediates there's kids with needs. And we really have to address those. This was the most strategic point of action. Could be at any of these levels. We cautioned it was important to make whatever actions and supports we did visible, so we could actually see if they made a difference, right? And not say that our response is so nebulous or so ill-defined or so broad that we never really know if it happens or not. We talked about continuous improvement being important, and this idea that you keep working it until something works. So that's really where we left off. And as I said, those have, I think, it's proven pretty good insights. And then we had this small thing called the pandemic. And this I think, adds some more context and contours to the story. And really pushes us, we make the case, we really have to think of a student support system that fits the times. And we know some of our times are we have staffing and substitute shortages. At the various times we're saying it's essential for kids to have relationships with adults in schools, right? Because one of the things we observed is that when kids got disconnected from school by having to take it remotely as best they could, that disconnection in a way was substantial, and it wasn't instantly turning the switch back when they came back into the building. That those human connections, once they get tethered, diminished, don't snap back immediately, right? And that's some of the struggles that's happening in schools now. And the challenge upon that, right, is that you need adults to form those relationships, and it's a very time we're struggling to have adults in the building when there's even more kids, right? We all know that. But the other thing with the pandemic is it's very dynamic, right? Students are okay at one moment and not the next, right? And so you can't just sort of do your thing. We do our check in September, here's what we should pay attention to, here's who's doing fine, and not look again until December, right? Because between September and December, you can get many more kids, right, that are sort of in need of support that just wasn't true in September. And at some level too, this is many folks, again, because of the press of time, did implicit shorthands in their early morning on track work and had sort of a sense in what the universe of struggling kids were and really sort of focused their efforts and monitoring on those and sort of assumed that kids that had never registered in any way were probably okay, right? But we know that's not the case now, right? Because again, many kids that were in their prior school histories didn't really show signs of attendance issues or behavior or course are now post-pandemic showing that, right? And the core work and some others really showed that, how it sort of pushed into areas of kids that in the past weren't really signaling now. And then finally, the students' furthest opportunity, as we saw today in Richard's presentation, were also the places hardest hit by the pandemic. Right? So that was like the sort of double hit. So that tells us that we need to, on top of what we had and we're thinking was good, we have to think about systems that are needed to monitor both this idea of school connectedness, are you connected to school, and to bring more adults into schools to help provide those relationship supports and some of those student supports. We need them to be adaptive, right? They can't be sort of like, we only check once in a while, we have sort of a very set course of action, and we just sort of play it out. And in a way, the argument is, and this is what we're trying to get to with this next generation, is that we sort of got to progress monitor everybody. And we should probably be doing any course, but we sort of, again, make these implicit shortcuts. And it's really, especially if we're saying it's for post-secondary success and pandemic impacts, that's everybody, And so you have to conceptualize your student support system as for everybody. It's not just for, pick your number, 15, 20, 30, 40% of our kids. So that's the context of which this GRAD partnership, which actually was launched yesterday. And really when we say partnership, there's some folks that are helping launch this, but this is like, we want everybody in this room should be part of the GRAD partnership. Like, it's very inclusive, Big Tent, collaborative, working together. And we're going to end today with a basic push to join us. But I just want to put that at the forefront, right? This is not just like, here's the thing some people are doing, isn't it nice? This is just getting it going. We know to succeed is going to take everybody. So really what happened is about, not quite a year ago, some of the folks, many of the folks are here, and many folks who were part of the Pathways, American Institute of Research, BAR, Carnegie Foundation for Cancer and Teaching, everyone graduates, Network for College Success, University of Chicago, Talent Development Secondary. These are all the folks that have been doing most of the technical assistance at a national level. There's many groups that have done this very powerfully at the regional or local level, but these were some of the folks who have been for a decade or more working nationally with states and schools. And we all sort of came to the conclusion together that, like, to meet the challenge of the times and really build these sort of next generation systems, building on what we did in Pathways, we really had to work in a collaborative way, right? And we really work together to create these connections and the systems of supports to help spread and scale sort of what we're calling these next generation early warning on track systems, which really are at the heart of student success systems. And so basically the guys that we're trying to partner with communities to use high quality student success systems so that schools are empowered to graduate all students ready for the future. Right? That's the core idea. That's the core idea we've always been working on for quite a while. Right? It's not a new idea. But we're really trying to think, how do we take this from what's been sort of organic growth to sort of more systematic growth? And how do we help folks that maybe entered this work a decade ago when we knew less and we had more simple models of the work, adapt that initial approach to sort of this next generation approach, right? It's sort of both those goals. And so we're looking at ways to, we'll dig into this in a minute, but build some tools that support it. Think about how we can build intermediary capacity, right? Because just there's about 5 national providers and maybe half a dozen or 8 or maybe 10 strong regional providers. Like, those folks are not enough, like, to get this everywhere it needs to go. We have to think, how do we build the capacity of other intermediaries to sort of do that work and support it? And how do we create some reflection tools and guidance materials and create a community of practice and a national improvement network? So that's sort of where this came from and where we're trying to go. And again, I guess the final thing is the why, right? Obviously, we can do more together than we're alone. We pool our experiences, we're not all recreating the same new set of materials. We have this shared aim, and these same shared deep commitments. And I know this is true for really everyone in this room. So, that's a nice big picture. How do you actually make this happen? And here's where we're going to actually ask for your help for the rest of our time together. And there's some problems in practice that have come up from like, okay, this is a grand idea, we're starting to do it, we run into some questions. And this is where we're really going back to the folks that helped us from the beginning to help think this through. So one is like, okay, you're talking about next generation, some people said maybe we call it high quality, like, what's the definition? What are you talking about? Like, is this what we've been doing all along? Why is this new? How is this new? Is this an evolution? Is this a revolution? What's the story? So we're going to ask you to be an editor and to take your pen to our draft definition. Now, what do you call this? Is this EWS 2.0? Is this, on track 2.0? Is this, if we call it student success systems, will anybody know what we're talking about? We like that better for what it says, but everyone knows early warning on track. You say student success systems, it could be anything, right? If you just go to it. So what's the name? Then we're going to show you our current theory of action and how to spread and adopt this, working with everybody. And does that make sense? And we're going to end with asking you to help us identify some problems in practice for both the community of practice and the network improvement community. And since the community of practice is kicking off next month, this is a really timely thing. So that's, and I'll pause there if there are any questions. And then after that, we're going to dive in and get to work. All right, so the first one is, we're going to give you a definition. We ask you to read it. And we're going to actually ask you where you think to give us some edits. Not extensive, don't worry about grammar. This is not a copy edit. This is a big idea edit. Just say like, you can even say like, I like it, I don't like it, doesn't make sense, don't understand it. That's the kind of like feedback we want. And we're also looking for your blink reaction, right? It's like, because you're the folks that do this work, you know what it is. So like, does this resonate or not? Tell us what you think. And we'll just give you a few minutes to read and be an editor. All right, I'm gonna just ask, we'll let you pull out of it before we end if you want to add something or think of it, but just gonna ask us to pause here. Anybody have any quick reactions? We're not gonna just, any blink reactions? Yeah.
I remember this being kind of a hang-up for me during the previous years was pinpointing secondary readiness attainment. Post-secondary. Like, is it 4-year graduation, 2-year graduation, in a career, in a good job?
All of those.
Yeah. And that's the part that made it jump from like, the ABCs, the binary dependent variable to like, oh my gosh, I need to do this.
Yeah, sure.
Building on that is that, and on your first point about research-based predictive indicators, if to that point, if you're saying like, we're using the word post-secondary, it's like you have a large research base, like, for indicators for say 4-year graduation. And so you can probably use the word indicator.
Yeah.
But then there are other things that maybe like career success that you're hypothesizing. You're like, I think this is probably going to be a predictor, an indicator, but I don't know yet. So that's a question.
That's a good point.
Is there somewhere in this definition that you want to say we're also piloting potential predictive indicators?
Yeah, like for example, like if people are struggling with like 2-year outcomes, like community colleges, those are much tougher to predict than 4-year. And what about various types of job training? Like absolutely, yeah. Good point.
It's still just a little fuzzy for me. I mean, I have to admit that since I was in part of the original group too. But it's still a little fuzzy for me because we use a lot of terms that are K-12 oriented, like grade, teacher, that kind of stuff. But I got the feeling, in addition to the indicator piece, that it's almost a pre-assessment of success when they cross over to the post-secondary area. That would be good information for the post-secondary people to have so that they could have me on their radar based on certain things, whether it be to advance me or to give me some additional types of support, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know the verbiage to put in there. Do y'all know what I'm talking about too?
Yeah. I mean, we have to go visit our big blur friends. We're going to have the same simultaneous to now. It's the same idea. No, it is idea. How do you build that bridge between the end of high school and the start of post-secondary? Very much so.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So first, let me just say, I love the way that this work has evolved. I think it's 5 years above and beyond where we started. And so I think the things that we're talking about now truly will help us take it to the next level. So there were a couple things that really stood out to me right off the bat that I think we should think through. So one, how do we convey that students truly are at the center of this so that that student voice and agency and level of ownership or their success comes through loud and clear. So it's not taken as adults doing things to or for students, but students being supported by these things that the adults are doing. So some of that might be in the communication around it, but I don't know that that comes through.
Yeah.
Even though we say engaging and supporting all students, like it still feels very adult to student focused and not so much students surrounded by adults.
That particularly becomes, it's important overall, but it's particularly important when we talk about this transition from here to there. If we're not at the center of that, yeah.
And related to that, when it talks about adults, again, I recognize that we sort of are using sort of schools in many ways as sort of the center of change here. But I don't know that it also is as inclusive as it should be around families, other community members, like who are all of these folks that are wrapping their arms around and supporting the students? And to the extent that they are a part of this coordinated effort, how are we ensuring that they too understand how they contribute the kinds of data and information and insight about what's going on with students and have access to it. So I think those things speak somewhat on the technical side, but I think that's part of what we're getting at in terms of who's involved in the analysis, who's coordinating the action, and how are all the people rowing in the same direction in support of the students. And then the last thing I just want to mention in this quick piece is in terms of the outside supports, I did have a wondering around like things like tutoring and after school and all of those pieces, whether they should be explicitly named in any way. So aside from conceptually being there, should it be explicit?
Even extracurricular maybe.
And,
Or references to a resource map.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I was thinking about. So this is, I've not been part of this group before. This is my first time. So hi, I'm Abby. I work at Uplift Education in Dallas. And I'm actually working on an EWS that we will share about tomorrow. But I think what we've been getting stuck on, and what I get stuck on as I read through this, is it still seems to be sort of like a snapshot more than it is an indicator. So I'm wondering how we use a tool like this to actually make predictions. And so I'm sort of wondering from this group, like how that's been part of the conversation so far. And then another piece, you mentioned the family thing, and that's something that we're thinking pretty intentionally too about at our district is how do we, with a tool like this, create almost like a student or family facing version of it to essentially like replace the way that we do report cards, right? So when a family sees sort of a snapshot of their student's progress, they're seeing a comprehensive view of it versus just grades and attendance.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly answer your first part is that
the
idea is that we actually do have a relatively small set of predictive indicators that help us get a sense of like who might we need to look at more closely when.
Right.
And then once we do that, the school-based team is then bringing in lots of other data to try to figure out what's the best course of action given that they've been sort of signaled by the predictive data. That's how we're trying to tie those two together.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe I'm acknowledging you said, for example, here, attendance, course grades, and a grade point average for the research-based predictive indicators.
Right.
But I think even as Bob, you shared here today, I think I've heard 3 different versions of those research-based predictive indicators. So my suggestion would be, let's get really tight on what those would be, that small number. You said ABCs, kind of from last generation, and then a little bit later you said it's good grades in challenging courses. Right. And here we're saying attendance, grades, and GPA. So let's find that list and get it tight.
A couple of thoughts to Collins from Gresham Barlow School District over on the West Coast. One of the things we've been playing with this year is how to get student feedback. So we've been reading through street data and thinking about how do we, and I realize that these are focus indicators that are fairly narrow, but trying to figure out how do we include, I guess to piggyback on what we've already said, that student voice component. We've had a director this year actually doing that, talking about 1,200 students district-wide. And it's really opened our eyes to see the interpretations that we had around what did or didn't need to happen in our systems by having students actually give us that feedback. So I don't know how to incorporate that student voice component or what element it would play, but for us it's been pretty eye-opening to go what we thought was in place or what we assumed or presumed was happening may or may not necessarily be true for certain groups of students. So that student voice piece for us has become a much larger component of how we're trying to analyze our system. And then the other thing I'm thinking about as I was reading through this is one of the hangups that we continue to have is there's such a desire to focus on the individual student. So these systems are designed around individual student indicators. And so the tendency for our team is to focus on those students without pulling back and thinking about what does it say about our systems and about the adults within the system that are causing the barriers that our students are facing relative to graduation and post-secondary success. So how do we keep that lens on the systems and even the adults?
Yeah, and that came up even in yesterday's discussion too, very clearly. In a way, it's like, it's a, that I hear what I said, it's you know, having both a early warning system for the school level and the student level sort of toggling between them. Yeah.
So Linda Kingston from Sacramento City on the West Coast as well. Thinking in terms of I'm a director of the district right now, but I was a principal where we were doing some significant changes. So I kind of see utilizing, how would I use this tool, right? So in my school community, high school community, I would see that I have an indicator that tells me X, Y, and Z, and I agree with making it tight, so I know what I'm really looking at. And then obviously I worked very hard as the principal to make sure my team of teachers have the same developed set of mindsets. That's why I've hired, and I've coached, and I've trained, and I've brought in people, right? So I've got a mindset group. And it's kind of like a student study team, right? So we come to the middle here, and we're looking at the information. But I am gonna say one more time, we do everything, but really talk about instruction. So how do we, once you look at the system and you're looking at where these pieces are, my kids might not be getting high quality coursework because my system in instruction isn't geared there, and we're not adding that as an element.
Right.
We put everything else in there.
Yes.
Support strategies and stuff, but I can tell you I had the luxury of having a Kaiser group of PhD psychologists who are working on their second PhD. I don't know how to do that. But I had them for a while. But my question was, I lose my kids 3 semesters. You fail 2 semesters of 9th grade, you fail your first semester of 10th, I lost you.
Right.
Period. I don't care what I've done, but I've lost you. So I grabbed a handful of my kids that qualified, got their parents' permission, and I gave them to my psychologist. Why? What was it? What did we fail in our system, in our instruction? And then we learned from the kids.
Right.
And then we came back and I put it into the WASC review and I put it into the PD, what we learned from the students, because if we're failing that group of students, we're failing almost all of our kids.
Right.
But instruction, it was instruction, guys. It was attitude toward instruction, attitude toward what the kids felt, the teachers felt they could do. They like us, the relationship was there, but they didn't believe we could do the work. So they went easy on us. Was the common denominator. So we just didn't do anything. So then we didn't do anything. So it's instruction, it's strategy. So I don't know how you put that in the system.
No, that's great.
But I just don't always see it.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer.
Listening to sort of the editing, and a takeaway for me is thinking, like, I've heard tool mentioned 2 or 3 times, and when I look at the slide and the thing, system, and there's a piece of it that has like some software in there, some kind of way, some kind of how. But that's just like a tiny little piece. And the system would be that multi-tiered across attendance, behavior, course performance, which would get to instruction. But that's not coming out for this audience from what I'm hearing the commentary is, which is helpful. I'll just say that. To me, that seems like there's this idea of a tool. People grabbed onto a tool. It doesn't say tool anywhere up there. Right? It doesn't say GPA anywhere either, right? On either of these, but people came to that, so, the language isn't getting us to the same place where we thought it would, so I just would lift that up. It's important.
Yeah. All right, that was amazing and wonderful, thank you so much. And I really wish we could, I use my executive authority to double the time of this session. But my authority is not that strong. So I'm just going to focus on one other element, which is related to this, but which is again, do a quick activity. And I'm going to ask for 2 things that activity sheet. But what is this? What is it a name? And this may seem like a small thing, but it's not, right? Because we are trying to communicate some evolution from where this work started. And what's really interesting about early warning on track work is it really spread organically. Like there wasn't some big plan or there wasn't some federal mandate. There wasn't some, it spread at different places at different times in different ways. And so we are trying to say, can we collectively think about how we take what we've learned to go to someplace even stronger. And it seems like that needs a name to signify that, right? So, you know, these are the early names are early warning systems, early warning indicator intervention, on-track systems, and then, you know, EWS 2.0 could be on-track 2.0. Sometimes we use next generation. Some people really like the idea that this is really about student success, put that there, or it could be something else. So we're gonna actually give you a card and ask you either pick one of those or write in your candidate for what would you call this? And where we want to end. It's really like, we see the GRAD Partnership as this large collective effort, but everybody participates in different ways. And so there's ways for districts and schools to participate, there's ways for intermediaries to participate, there's a number of you have already signed up your advising partners, there's more of you to join those as advising partners. We also have folks who's communicating partners that help spread the word in the networks. And the very good way is this community of practice, which I said, is really just creating a space where folks doing the work sort of come together and share and learn from each other. So we have a website where you can visit, and you can also, there's a place to indicate how you might like to participate on that. That would be great if you fill that out, because we want everyone to participate in some form. And Patricia is the person to make it all happen. And she will happily talk with you more about different ways and different ways to help and answer any questions. And we just really appreciate all the feedback.
Can I make a quick pitch?
Yes.
On the website, I did this activity yesterday with a group of educators that we've worked with for a couple of years. And we did a scavenger hunt on the website. There's a resources tab, which the quote from the educators I worked with yesterday was, "A treasure trove of resources. I will use this website as I prepare for my professional learning for next year." So they found it incredibly valuable, and it already exists. It's not a to be, it's there. So I would just encourage people, the resources tab takes you to another resources tab, and it's really well organized to be incredibly user-friendly from about 30 educators that I work with. So that's ready now. Bye.
All right, yes, thank you. That was a wonderful session. It exceeded everything I could have imagined as far as the depth and breadth of feedback, which I knew we were going to get from this group. You've been with us from the start, so we're together on this. And I'm really excited to work with you on the next chapter, the next edition of this hearing. And thanks.